Hello and welcome back to Seeing Things Differently. My name is Alicia, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about starting the conversation. This video is intended more for parents and guardians of children who are caregiving. So we're going to start by explaining the issues that can arise when children aren't informed of what's going on at home. We're going to talk about how we can open that conversation and create that safe space for them, and how to maintain that safe space and that family dynamic where children feel that they can ask questions and be informed of what's going on with their parent or loved one. I'm joined today by the wonderful Ross. Ross and I met when we were backpacking in Peru, and he's become a very good friend, but he's here today to talk to us from more of a psychology perspective. So I'll let Ross introduce himself and then we'll get started.
So my name is Ross. So I'm a clinical social worker here in Sydney, Australia. I work for the health department here in Sydney. And my background is in child and adolescent mental health. So I've been working in that field for the past going on 4 years now. And my specialty is doing psychotherapy with children and families. So, dealing with the sort of moderate to acute end of mental illnesses. But more recently, I've had experience delivering early intervention programs to children in primary school years that may have onsets of behavioral or emotional difficulties in the home and at school. And really a lot of that work has been focused around emotional literacy with children, helping parents and children to develop a conversation with one another about emotions and about feelings and about really big events that happen in life for anyone in the lifespan, whether it's children or adults or older people, life happens. So that's definitely my main area of expertise, and I have a real drive and a passion for it. So I love the work that I do.
That's excellent. And thank you so much for joining us today. And I think your insight will be definitely helpful for this video in talking about how to start that conversation and create that safe space to discuss those difficult emotions and the challenges that arise from living with and caring for potentially someone with a form of dementia or rare form of dementia. So I thought it would be helpful for us to start by explaining what are some of the issues that could arise if children aren't kind of clued in or informed about what's happening in their home environment.
Well, what I've seen in my experience is that, when there's been, significant life events that have occurred, within households and within families, and often parents, understandably sometimes have this sense of protectiveness for not wanting their children to be exposed to, very confrontational things that, even for us adults as well. And what happens is that some children are very intuitive, and they pick up very easily and very quickly on moments of distress with their parent or in their families, and that comes out in obviously challenging and difficult behaviours. So typically we see two types of presentations. One is obviously the more commonly known one, which is the externalizing behaviour. So children acting out in school, in the classroom, and at home. Becoming very easily distressed, very easily worked up. But the other type of presentation we see are the internalizers. So the children that seem to, be really quiet, really withdrawn, really shy, have a lot of difficulty, being assertive in peer relationships with other peers, and maybe feeling as though they don't have a space where they can talk or they can sort of have a secure connection with their family. Definitely some of the issues that I've come across in my practice for sure.
Yeah, and I would say that actually I really identify with what you said there about that kind of second type of presentation and that internalizing, because I think that's something that's not necessarily overlooked, but teachers and even parents sometimes will see that kind of naughty behavior, if you like, and maybe realize that that's perhaps some sort of cry for attention, or that there might be something going on and there might be further discussions then to try and get to the root of that behavior. But for people who internalize, and I would include myself in that category as well, it can be incredibly hard to even know what you need to ask for to help yourself. And you kind of feel like you're left almost flailing if you don't have any information and you don't know how to ask for it. So that, as you've said, that can seriously affect schoolwork and behavior. And I think in terms of grades and trying to manage and balance everything, it can be extremely challenging, and it can feel very, very isolating as well.
Particularly for teachers in the classroom setting, when they see the internalizing behaviors, you know, often as well, the internalizers can fly under the radar. Because they're not the disruptive ones in class. You know, teachers spend a lot of their time focusing on the more challenging students because they're the most disruptive. And so the internalizers really sort of get a backseat in that. And sometimes what internalizers actually adapt to is that they're able to adapt to being able to not necessarily, you know, fall so far behind that they do get flagged by the school, but they're able to just sort of achieve that minimal expectation where not a lot of attention is given to them or centered on them.
Absolutely. And as you said, kids are very intuitive. So I think they can always sort of sense when there's something going a bit wrong at home, even if it's not explicitly said. There is that atmosphere. And I think from my experience with dad and with my mum, obviously it was an incredibly difficult situation. It's not something that's easy to navigate. And I think for a lot of parents, it's something that you don't expect. Nobody expects that they'll be kind of managing a dementia diagnosis. And particularly if it's an early onset dementia diagnosis, that can really alter the plans that you kind of had for your future and for your family. But in trying to keep that kind of hidden and wanting to protect the family is completely understandable. But at the same time, you have to acknowledge that there's kind of a payoff between that protection and kind of keeping the kids secure and also leaving them in a space where they know something's wrong, but they don't quite know what. So with my mum and dad, we had seen that dad was changing. You know, there were certain small things that just weren't him. So, you know, a few minor like scratches and bumps in the car when he was a very good driver, or issues with reading or writing, things that he could usually do very, very well. And mum and dad would say, you know, nothing's wrong, he's just stressed. But it was becoming very obvious that it wasn't just stress. There was something really wrong with what was happening with dad. And that left me, I can only speak for myself and not my brother, but that really did leave me in a place where it was like, I know something's wrong, and I now know you're not telling me something. And I feel that that's altering my relationship, not just with dad now, but also with mum. So it can be a very difficult place to kind of navigate out of as well. And I wonder, Ross, if you could speak a little bit about perhaps children feeling maybe neglected or excluded in those kind of situations, even if it's unintentional from the parents.
Kids can also sense when they're being left out of the conversation at points as well. So kids can really sense, you know, obviously if there's, you know, a heated family discussion, you know, the classic example is, of course, two parents fighting over something, and a child comes in and they can just sense that there's this air of tension in the room, and they can sense that something's amiss and something's not right, you know, with what they're accustomed to. But the parents will put on a brave face. And they'll act like everything's okay. You know, children have just as much of a right to be aware of the things that are going on, you know, with their loved ones, you know, just as adults are, of course. It's just all about finding ways that we can explain to children what is going on in the family home, what to expect, and, you know, just that reassurance that, you know, despite all of this, that they are supported by, you know, other caregivers, you know, their other parents, or their siblings, whoever that may be, whoever their important person in life is, and that, you know, they can be helped through these challenging times.
So moving on from that now, I think it's also important that we talk about how do we open that conversation, or how do we create that safe space or that environment for children to ask questions and understand what's going on. And I think ultimately that is a personal choice. You know, some people might really prefer, I want to tell my kids kind of like the basic information about what's going on, but I don't want to worry them, so I don't want to give them too much. And Ross, I'm sure you can speak later to how that works for different age groups as well, because obviously you have to kind of tailor that to your audience as such. I think another way you can create the open space is just to make it known at the outset that this is a space that's free of judgment. So actually, if kids have questions, which they often do, they're curious people, then it's okay for them to ask that. And even if it might sound like a silly question, it's important that they know that they're heard. And I think that's kind of the foundation of this, is rather than seeing it as a conversation in which you need to unload lots of information about the rare dementia itself or about its progression. Instead, it kind of needs to be grounded in giving the child that space to learn and understand what they would like to learn and understand, rather than what you as a parent see as important for them to understand. So I think from my personal experience, Mum and Dad did a great job when they did eventually open up that conversation. I think for a while they did avoid saying that it was dementia, because I'd grown up where my grandparents had had dementia, and I'd sort of seen that progression and seen them be in care homes and need quite high levels of care. And I think it would have really shaken me up to know that that was what was going to happen to Dad from the beginning. And actually that wasn't what happened to Dad, because he was living with a rare form of dementia and the progression was nothing like what we see with typical Alzheimer's. So I think to have said it's dementia at that point almost would have been counterproductive, because I think it would have just scared me almost back into a shell of not wanting to engage. Whereas hearing, okay, Dad is experiencing some changes, he's been having these difficulties, and actually listing not just the car accidents, but the other things that he was struggling with. And then allowing my brother and I to sort of ask questions like, what does that mean going forward? Or how can we help out? What do we need to tell our friends or teachers? And I think that's another huge part, is in that conversation, reminding your child that it's okay for them to share this with other people externally. And I don't mean, to go out and kind of make posts about it on social media and tell absolutely everyone, but to feel that it's okay for them to not have to shelter those emotions or that conversation. So if they have a best friend that can provide a level of emotional support that perhaps you can't, because maybe your child won't open up to you fully, or you're concerned about them withholding information, it's important that I think we encourage that conversation and that support in a much more widespread way. So knowing that they don't just have to rely on you as the parent.
For sure. I think you touched on some great points there, Alicia. And I think another one as well is it's important to allow children to experience, a particular emotion that they may feel at the hearing of that news, and even just checking in with children and just seeing, how are you feeling about this? Would you like to talk about how you're feeling? Like you said, letting the children be able to ask questions about what they've been told, but also having the parent to say, it's okay to feel confused, or it's okay to feel sad, or it's okay to feel angry about this. Those are perfectly valid responses and appropriate responses to hearing news like that as well. And I think it's important as well that when we have this conversation with children, children are at varying developmental levels across their growth. And as they emerge into adolescence and then obviously into adulthood, of course, you wouldn't have the same conversation that you have with your 14-year-old as you like you would with a 2-year-old. So making sure that the language is simple and is clear and is communicative for where the child is at and for what the child can understand. And I mean, look, children are good in the sense that, if something doesn't make sense, children can have puzzled or confused looks on their faces. And that's a pretty good cue to then be able to say, oh, I can see you're a little bit confused about that. I'll try explain it to you again in this way or in this fashion as well. And, I think it's important that when we look at the age ranges of about sort of 3 to 5, like you said, Alicia, things like saying, oh, you might have noticed whoever it is, whether it's a grandparent or a parent, is doing this, and he's going through some changes at the moment, but he's still that same person underneath. He still loves you very much, just like I do as well, or just like whoever it is that your safe adults are in your life. They all love you very much, and you will be supported through this. And of course, as you then get towards sort of the sort of 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 stage, that conversation might look different, of course, depending on, they probably have a bit more of an awareness and an understanding of that things happen in life. And especially when we get into adolescence, a lot of adolescents are more aware that their parents aren't, necessarily this perfect embodiment, but that they're getting this idea that they coexist in a world with other people, and other people have things that happen in their life as well. But it's still just as important to include children, no matter what developmental age they are, in the conversation, and reassure them that they will be supported through these challenging times, and that it's okay to feel whatever it is that they're experiencing.
It creates that relationship that goes two ways. So yes, there's still the child, you're still the parent, but actually I think it helps to create that open door where they now feel like, okay, we're on maybe more of a level footing because you've included me in this discussion and I feel part of the family. And that's going back to what we were saying before about how if kids are kind of left in the dark, they can start to experience that exclusion or sort of feeling like they're being neglected and left out. So that is really important. And I think another reason that it's so important to open this space is also to protect and kind of preserve the dignity and identity of the person with the diagnosis. Because if you have kids at home who don't know what's going on with, let's say in my case, didn't know what was going on with dad, he constantly is asking me to do really simple tasks for him. I don't understand why, because as far as I have been told, or as far as I'm aware, dad's still fine, dad's okay, there's nothing wrong. But I'm seeing these changes and I'm actually getting quite frustrated with him. I'm saying, why can you not just make yourself a cup of tea or coffee? Or, I just made you one, it's right in front of you. How hard is it to actually just like pick it up and drink it? And that then puts dad or that parent in a position of feeling like they are maybe a bit useless or not doing so well, and it strips them of that kind of independence, when actually it's probably taken a lot for them to actually come and ask you, can you make me a cup of tea, or can you help me with this task? And particularly to ask your kids for support with things like that, I don't think it's something that any parent really imagines for themselves.
For sure, certainly.
So following on with family dynamics now, I wondered if you had anything to add there, Ross.
I think so. Getting such a diagnosis really shakes that up, and really all of the family members have to rearrange the way that they operate within the family unit around the person that's received this diagnosis, because obviously they're going to need a lot more support. And sometimes that comes with its own challenges, because it's a new way of adapting. You're adapting to new roles, to new ways of interacting.
Absolutely. And it's making me think as well about, maybe further down that line with that diagnosis, people might need actually care and support from external people. So not close friends or family or anyone that's even known to you or the children. So in cases where you might have to get carers, whether they just drop in or they're actual live-in carers, without that understanding of why these people are here and what's going on, that would be a very unsettling environment for a child, to have people coming in and out of what is their safe space at home and not understanding why. So it's important to kind of not necessarily get in there straight after the diagnosis, but to be able to give that child some kind of idea of how to prepare, not just for how to look after their parent, but prepare also for how to look after themselves going forward. I wonder if we could maybe touch on now how to actually maintain that safe space. So after we've had that initial conversation where the kids have been informed of what's going on with mom or dad or whoever in the family, how do we now translate that to an ongoing conversation where the kids feel that they can update the parents with their emotions and still feel that they can ask questions further down the line?
I think what's really key there is being in tune with your child. Obviously, that requires a lot of real sort of complex analysis and, sort of thinking on the part of the parent. But I think being able to identify cues that a child may be exhibiting, even though a child might not come up to you and say, I'm feeling sad, or I'm feeling angry, or I'm feeling just confused and frustrated today. Just being aware and just looking out for little cues. I think, just being gentle with your child and making sure that you're also in a state of mind where you can have that conversation with your child, because it's impractical to try and have that conversation with your child and try to check in with them where they are emotionally. And when you yourself are, might not be, in a very well state of mind either. And you might need that support to help keep yourself in check. We talk about this concept of you can't fill up, another person's cup unless your own cup is full. And this is definitely applicable to families, where there are children as well. Children are unable to fill up their own cup. They just don't have that capacity yet to be able to have, multiple self-care strategies where they can go, I know that if I'm feeling this way, I'm aware of that. So I know what I need to do, which is, go for a run or have a meditation. They're just not at that level there.
Absolutely. And I think, I was going to say initially for younger children, but actually thinking about it, I would have found this useful even sort of as I was coming into my teen years and like getting further on into adolescence as well. But is to have a space where you don't rely on the child coming to you when there's a problem. And that doesn't mean that you constantly need to be checking in with the kids. So it's not that every single day you get home from work and you're like, talk to me, tell me about your emotions and your feelings, because that can become quite intrusive quite quickly. But I think it's also important not to leave them kind of flailing, thinking, okay, well, mum said I can go to her if I have any more questions, but I don't know what my questions are. So I don't have anything to take to her, but I just almost need that comfort and that reassurance. So perhaps to create a strategy whereby you have maybe a whiteboard in the house somewhere, just one of the little ones, or even a notepad or something. Everyone in the family perhaps marks how they're feeling, just with like a happy, okay, or sad face. And, if you're seeing consistent sad faces on that kid's chart, okay, time for a conversation, time to say, are you just feeling low and you just wanted to express that? Or is there something I can do? Is there some kind of intervention we can kind of put in place to help here? And, at some points it may be relevant to have a more rich conversation about potentially that child accessing therapy, or like we said before, external support from people outside of that close family unit. But I think having a way that they can indicate to you that they're stressed without having to verbally communicate that with you can also be a huge help. And another really important thing, I think, throughout this whole conversation of maintaining that safe space is not to actually exclude the person with dementia. And I think that's something people do a lot, is they think, oh, it's my job to speak on behalf of this person, so I'll explain to the kids what's wrong, what's going on with mom or with dad, when actually it might be best, if it's comfortable for that person with the diagnosis, for you all to have the conversation and for you to make it known to the children that it's okay if they have questions for the person with dementia. It might be that I know that when I was younger, I didn't have questions for mum. They'd explained what was going on with dad. I didn't have questions for her. I had questions for dad about, what's it like for you? Why can't you make a cup of tea? What is it that you're now finding difficult? And those are things that mum could never answer because she's not living that experience. But it might be useful to introduce them as almost a tool for the children to use too, so they don't feel that they've just immediately lost one parent. Dad's ill, that's it, dad's ill. No, dad's ill, but he's still very much part of this family. There's still a lot he can do. There's still a lot we can do together. Make sure that we include him as much as possible, because at the end of the day, it's his diagnosis. So it's important as well that we understand that person is also managing their own diagnosis, and it's not just down to us as a family unit to manage it for them or on their behalf. And something that might help to keep that open conversation in that case is to actually develop perhaps some kind of shared word that, if it's used by the kids or by the person with dementia, that just means I need some time for me. Like I need, 15-20 minutes to myself where I don't want people asking me, are you sure you're okay? Are you sure I can't help you? Can I get you anything? Because again, that can be quite invasive when we're feeling that sort of closed off, sheltered, kind of wanting to get away from it all. So maybe having, just a simple word that allows people to understand, okay, I need to back off. I need to give this person some space. And it's important to have it for the person with dementia as well, because it might be that, in saying, dad's still dad or mum's still mum, the kids maybe don't receive that as, oh, there's nothing wrong, so it's fine and I'll keep behaving the way I was before. But actually for the person with the dementia, that can be incredibly challenging. Let's say you finish a long day at work, you just need a bit of a reset, but the kids want to play, or the kids want to go to the cinema, the kids want to go for a walk, the kids want to watch their favorite show with you, but you just can't manage. If you were to just turn around and say, no, I can't do that, or I don't want to, or I don't have the energy, that's quite a sharp response. And that child might see that as they don't want to spend time with me, rather than they need some time to themselves before they're able to enjoy the time with me. So that brings today's video to a close, and we've been talking about starting the conversation, so creating that open and safe space for kids to understand what's going on at home and with their parent who's been diagnosed with dementia or a rare form of dementia. We've talked about the issues that might arise if kids aren't clued in on what's going on at home. So things like changes in schoolwork, behavior, the fact that they can sense the stress and tension that we have at home. We've also talked about how you can open that subject and how you can maintain the conversation as things progress through the family. So understanding how we can check in with every member of the family and making sure that kids know that they are loved and supported just as they were before the diagnosis. So thank you so much to Ross for joining us today. And he is going to be appearing in some future videos as well, so look out for those.
Thanks so much for having me, Alicia. It's been a pleasure.
It's been wonderful having you and all of your amazing insights. And just to finish up, we thought it would be really nice to end with a reflection today. So these are just a couple of questions to carry with you as you go on through the rest of the day. Maybe sit and journal, make some notes, write about it as well to make those thoughts feel more tangible. But what would have made you feel safe as a child? And how do you think you can offer that to your kids? So on that note, thank you again for listening, and we'll see you next time.